this video, we will see what we call functional analysis and how it can be used when we are dealing with an innovation project. For the user, the customer, innovation means something. Innovation is what will bring functions, a solution that fixes his or her customer pain, his or her problem. For a scientist or an engineer with an innovative mind, innovation means something different. Innovation is when different functions have been assembled to target the customer avatar, the user's need. So, as a researcher, a scientist, an engineer, our first goal is to define or select the functions our solution must deliver to fix the customer pain. We must be very careful not doing the usual mistake trying to find which user could use the property of our invention. We can identify 4 types of functions. First one is the primary function, then the differentiating function, the accessory function, and the marketing function. The primary function is the obvious function that the system must possess at least. Without this function, users will not use the system. Here are some examples of primary function. A car must transport you from point A to point B. If it doesn't transport you, you don't buy a car. A coffee machine must make coffee. A fridge must keep product cold. A battery must store and deliver electricity. Note that over time, the primary functions of the same product can change. Initially, cell phones were created to allow you to call everyone from everywhere, and that was the reason why you were buying a cell phone. You were checking that the connection was good, the signal was strong wherever you were. Now, cell phones are mostly used to keep connected, and you will not buy a cell phone if it allows you to call people, but it's not designed with the functions required to check and access your social media. The second function is the differentiating function. It modifies the primary function and will help the solution, the system, to differentiate from other systems, from competition. Here are some examples of differentiating function. For example, the car you built is faster than the average car, or it's energy efficient, or is cheaper, or your car can take heavy loads, or your car can transport 10 people. We saw that the differentiating function modifies the primary function. For the accessory function, it's a function that doesn't modify the primary function. It adds a function which is unrelated to the primary function to create some added value to the product. Let's look at some examples of accessory functions. Your car has a radio or a courtesy mirror for the passenger, or has a Wi-Fi. You see that none of these functions modify the primary function of your car, which is to take you from a point A to a point B. And finally, we have the marketing function. The marketing function is not a real function. It doesn't provide an additional property or help the system to do something else. But if it's not really a useful function for the product itself, it's a useful function for selling the product because it helps sell or make sell the product, which is a very important objective when you define your innovation strategy. This is an example of a marketing function. Giving a red color to shoes sold will not modify the primary function or even the accessory function of these shoes. But people will buy these shoes and not others, even if they are slightly the same, because of this red sole. Other example of marketing function will be the specific design of an object or a car, will be the brand reputation or the color. For example, Ferraris are always red. The way you will proceed is to identify first the functions of your system and those that fit your customer avatar expectation. You must identify and list the different functions according to the classification. Are they primary function, differentiating function, accessory function, or marketing function. You will identify and you will rank them according to the customer avatar profile. And based on that, you'll be able to see if the functions of the current system are adapted to the customer's expectations. You will check with your potential users if these functions fit with their expectation. If they don't, totally or partially, you'll see how you can improve your system by adding or modifying some functions in order to fit better with the customer expectation. Let's take some example of different aircraft. So, airplanes are basically using the same concept. They are flying machines. But the different airplanes displayed here are demonstrating different functions. The first example is the airplane built by the Wright brothers in 1903. The main function of this airplane was a primary function. It was built to demonstrate that one can fly with a motorized engine. For this aircraft, obviously, they can deliver the primary function, flying, but what makes them different is the differentiating function, the fact they can do aerobatics. Another example of aircraft is the aircraft used for traveling. They still deliver the primary function, flying from point A to point B. Of course, they have some differentiating function like having a pressurized cabin, having some lights, etc. But the reason why people use this aircraft is for the accessory function. The fact that this aircraft demonstrates that one can travel peacefully and we could add also for a rather inexpensive cost. For the last example, we see that the reason why people will use an aircraft is not in this case the primary functions, the accessory function, or the differentiating function, even if the aircraft have all of them. But in this example, the aircraft are associated with traveling, and using this marketing function of aircraft, it's a way to sell flight ticket to people who don't need to go from point A to point B. We can summarize the 4 different functions that are highlighted depending on the type of aircraft and on the function of each aircraft. We have first the primary function, and the first airplane was created to demonstrate the possibility of a flying object with a pilot. In the second example, we had aircraft built for their differentiating function, how they can display unique aerobatics performances. In the third example, it's for the accessory function of the airplane that it has been designed, which is actually being able to offer a unique comfort over price ratio. And finally, the aircraft can be even used to link an object, the airplane, to a concept, the idea of travel, and use this object to sell that concept. Let's look at a totally different example. Here, we have a system developed and patented by a UK company, Cripple. And their system, it's a system to hook and connect pipes. There are other systems on the market. And when you compare their price, you see that their material is not cheaper than the competition. Actually, it's much more expensive than the other one. Where is the differentiating function? It's actually the price, not the cost of the system itself, but the total cost when you include the time to install the system and compare it with competition. The system itself, it's more expensive, but because it's easier to install and can be done in a shorter time, overall, the total cost is reduced by 7%. The question now is to know how you can develop your innovation in order to deliver the functions that your customers are expecting. We can divide this process in several steps. Step 1. You have an idea, you have a solution, you have a discovery, and we assume that this system, this solution, has some functions. Step 2. You will define who will be your potential customers, and you will identify their problems, their expectation. Remember, innovation always begins with a problem, never with a solution. Step 3. You use the classification we presented with the 4 types of functions to analyze and sort the functions displayed by your system. Then you identify which functions can respond to the customer's expectation. Step 4. If the functions of your prototype did not respond perfectly or partially to the customer's expectation, it's now time to develop or adapt this function to get a better fit. Step 5. Now you have the version number 2 of your innovation, which is supposed to be better adapted to the customer's expectation. Step 6. You go back to your customers and ask how they feel about this version 2 of your system. Step 7. If they are not fully happy or think it can use some improvement, you go back and work again on improving or adding new functions. And you see that in the real life, you will have different loops of step 5, 6, and 7 until you reach a stage of development for your innovation where people are ready to use, hence buy it. We can compare what we defined as functional analysis with some well-established methods like system requirements. System requirements are usually used in engineering. The system requirement refers to the definition of specification for a system to be achieved. You can sort overall between the primary requirements, there are the mandatory specifications to be obtained, and the secondary requirements, which are some additional optional specifications. With the system requirements, the primary requirements are functions that must be achieved, must be delivered. The secondary requirements are kind of icing on the cake, which is good if you can deliver them, but it's not really compulsory. You see here that we have a main difference between the system requirement and the functional analysis. In functional analysis, we might have to define some functions like the marketing function that do not change at all the way the system will work. It's not a requirement for the system. Probably most of the engineers will ensure that this is not their problem, this is not their job. This is a marketing concept and you have to let the marketing guys taking care of it. And this is actually a big mistake. Because of course, your system must work, but the goal of your system is to be purchased, used by people. So you can have the better system if people don't buy it, don't use it for a reason which has nothing to deal with the way the system is working, you are in trouble. Indeed, it's a big misunderstanding to believe that people want innovation, that they are running after innovation, that they want to adopt new system, new solutions, new product. Most of the people will adopt your solution once it has been used by the earlier adopters. And the earlier adopters, they do not buy your system for what you do, but for why you do it. The risk when you focus only on the system requirement is to focus only your activity on technology, the specifications of the device, and forget what are the user's expectations. Unlike system requirements, function analysis would mostly compare with methods like requirement engineering, system requirements, or requirements management. So, function analysis is a way to take into account the whole system and set the priority between the different type of functions according to the user expectation. In another way, system requirements or system management requirement is also used to quantify and set the hierarchy between the system specifications to be achieved in order to fulfill the customer's expectation. To conclude, we can say that the functional analysis is a method to define which functions your innovation could deliver. It's a way to create and set the priority between functions according to your users' expectations. Never forget that your first concept, your first prototype will never be the final product. And last but not least, let's see some concluding tips. It's very important to always remember that innovation is a way to respond to customers' expectation. Innovation begins always with a problem, rarely with a solution. And the sequence of development must also and always follow your users' expectation. And finally, there's a quote by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, which said, "If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late." So never wait for perfection before you launch your product. This is not called innovation. This is called procrastination.